everyone. This is Elizabeth Gregerson with Becker's Healthcare. I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers. We have Kelly Stack, Head of Marketing for North American Dental Group, Lauren Leone, Chief Growth Officer for Cardinal Digital Marketing, and Ruchi Patel, Group Media Director for Cardinal Digital Marketing. Thank you, Kelly, Lauren, and Ruchi for being here today. And now I'll turn the floor over to you to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. Hey, everyone. My name is Lauren, as Elizabeth said, and I'm going to be moderating and guiding our conversation today. Elizabeth mentioned to put your questions in the chat, and while we'll save some time at the end, I like to be a little bit more dynamic with these events. So if you have a question that's relevant to something we're discussing, pop it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it, and we'll try to answer it in real time, get the opinions of the experts that we have here today. So without further ado, I know we did some quick intros, but want to kind of dig in a little bit. Kelly has been a partner of Cardinal's for the better part of a year since you joined North American Dental, and it's really been game-changing for our partnership, working together with Ruchi, our client service team, our media experts, to understand how do we take 280 location, 80 brand dental group and effectively run media. How do you do things at a macro level, but also ensure that you understand you're in a local auction for services? And we need to think about what each practice needs as an individual business. So Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. Ruchi, our expert, thanks for being back with us on this event. I'm going to take us through a quick agenda, and then we're going to get into the questions. I'm going to be asking you guys about the work you've done, the planning behind it, so that we can share some actionable insights with everybody listening. So in terms of agenda, most important, kind of the foundation before we even start talking scale and marketing strategy is how do we align with C-suite? How do we align with operations? How do we make sure we're not marketing for marketing's sake, but really driving what the business needs? So Kelly, I've got a lot of questions for you about that. We'll get into that in a minute. Data enablement. So we've got all this great, guidance coming in from operations. We have all these plans of what we want to run. How are we going to measure it? How are we going to make sure that what we do over here in marketing actually has an impact on what the C-suite and operations have told us that they need? So absolutely critical pre-work. And then we'll get into what did we actually action on? How did we run the media? Ruchi will kind of talk us through some of the structure, campaigns, and initiatives that have been successful. And then we'll kind of end on what does it look like to go beyond some of the core demand capture channels to start to build a full funnel strategy, and really hear from Kelly on where you think the industry is going, where marketing is going, and what you're focused on for the rest of the year. So let's start with aligning with C-suite and operations. We all know this kind of cookie cutter, every practice gets the same strategy isn't going to work because the needs are different, the markets are different, competitive pressures, service mix might be different, providers come and go. So we've got to find a way to really think about each location. Kelly, I want to start with kind of asking you how you came into the business. What were some of the first things you looked at in terms of aligning with operations? And were there any signals to you that maybe they were out of sync, marketing and ops?
I think that one of the earliest signals I see in any practice is just a misalignment on needs. So practice coming to us and saying, we need more patients, we need more patients, we need more patients. But then we look at our cost per booking and it's astronomically high. We don't see a ton of availability online. So it really is the first signal is that misalignment between needs and what's actually appears to be available from a patient experience perspective.
And when you think about getting that data, like, hey guys, I see online the bookings aren't available, or I see that the CPAs are really high, doing that at scale is really challenging. What kind of inputs, like how are you getting in touch with the field? How are you getting data that's helpful and meaningful and actionable?
Great question. You will hear me talk about this throughout the hour. The most critical partnership is really with that operations field team. So I would say my key working partner at NADG is our Chief Operating Officer. And that relationship has been a complete game changer in what I'm able to affect. Our team has any data piece that we need at our fingertips. It's just asking for the right thing and learning together on why we need that piece of data. the operations and data team at NADG is none to any other. It's been just an incredible partnership, and I think that melding of the departments is absolutely critical to get where you need to be.
And was this kind of a new partnership? Like, when you think about a tip for anyone who maybe hasn't reached over the aisle yet to that ops leader, like what would be a piece of advice to get that conversation rolling?
It absolutely was a very new way of thinking of the business, particularly for some of our operations VPs that had never heard the question, we want to give you more new patients, but it doesn't appear that you have the slots for those new patients, which was new news to them, right? And they're like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. It's sort of Econ 101. If we need to push demand, there has to be some supply to push it into. Without that supply, AKA an open new patient appointment, and not to mention just any appointment, an open new patient appointment at the beginning of the week, at the beginning of the day, when new patients actually want to be seen. So I think it's just making sure that it can be a difficult conversation to begin, but as long as I think you approach it with a quizzical perspective of, hey, I'm wondering how we treat this, or what do you think about that? Do you think it would be helpful if, and really not coming in and bombarding with, this is what we're going to do and why and how, and more treating it as a true partnership, which it is, and trying to develop that and also learn from them. What are your roadblocks? How can we work together to reduce those? And at what pace do we need to go? Let's just make sure that we're also spending efficiently and effectively, because the offices also don't want to overload their P&Ls with marketing dollars that aren't effective.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of shared common objective, which is grow the practice, get patients in the door, keep the doctors busy. Let's anchor it on that, and then work back to the marketing problem, which is, our motivation at heart.
Exactly. Right. It's like, we can do that part. We need to figure out the other stuff first to be able to effectively do the piece.
Yeah. So let's look a little bit at kind of some of the specific goals and the alignment, that the framework that we built here to align. Can you talk us through kind of what were the main objectives that we set out in alignment with ops?
Sure. So the main objectives were really to grow, new patient bookings. That could be via online booking or via call, which we're driving with media. So that was number one, and more specifically to drive new patient bookings in offices that needed more new patient bookings year over year to meet their revenue goals. So we know there's a ton of nuance in our business, and one office may be down a doctor this year than they were last year at the same time. Therefore, we don't expect the same volume of appointments. So we're really taking into consideration all those different inputs to make sure that we are aligning new patient volume with capacity in the offices.
And when you think about, getting in, I see number 2 here, is there's a volume conversation, and then there's an efficiency conversation. How did you start to think about like the scale? Because it is a spectrum, and you can kind of, inch your way across it and slide back and forth as the needs evolve.
It is a spectrum. And I think that cornerstone of any strategy has to always have in mind scalability in a DSO. And it's slightly different if it's a one branded DSO versus a multi-brand DSO. However, I think that the principles remain the same, which there are different demographics can be similar across the US. So you might have an office in Ohio that demographically and behaviorally looks very, very similar to an office in Pittsburgh. And that's more important than being in either Pittsburgh or Ohio. So it's really focusing on the type of practice and the type of patient that might attend that practice, and having scalable, call it 3, 4, whatever pronged strategies to push out to those different similar types of offices in a scalable manner.
And I'm going to bounce around a little bit, and we're going to send out this deck afterwards. So if we skip, you don't get to read every word. I promise you guys will get access to it. That is precisely what we have to do when we're operating at the scale you guys are operating at, with the number of individual brands. This isn't, NADG and everybody's NADG, and we could just do these like big full funnel initiatives. How do we cohort? I like to use the word cohort. How do we cohort or build these, kind of pillars of clinics that behave the same? So can you talk me through a little bit about how you took the capacity and then started to align it? I know working with Ruchi and our team on what are the playbooks that we need to develop for specific types of practices.
Absolutely. So I'll take you through this slide at a very, very high level. It's a 4-quadrant strategy that takes into consideration operational capacity. So to the left of the axis, you'll see, is there operational capacity? Can you take more new patients or not? To the right, you can take more new patients. To the left, you cannot. And then on our other axis, it's, do we need patient growth to meet our revenue goals? Anything below that line, we don't actually need more than last year to meet our goals, and anything over, we do. So if you take that into consideration, our quadrant A is overbooked. They don't have capacity, but they actually need more new patients to meet their revenue goals. That's like a lose-lose situation. So you'll see where we have to make up for that across the platform. We know we are not going to achieve our goals in those specific offices. So how do we make up across the rest of the platform to compensate for that dividend? So as we move to the right, B is open chair. So this is our priority quadrant. It's yes, they have capacity, and yes, they need new patients. So naturally, this is where we're going to focus our spend. If we go down to number C, or letter C, it is steady. So they have capacity, but they don't necessarily need new patients to meet their revenue goals. C is the group that makes up for A. So we know A is a loss leader. We're going to make up for it in offices that don't necessarily need it, but can take that capacity. And then D is really, they don't have capacity, but they don't need new patients. And so that's our signal that we don't need to overinvest in those offices.
And it's interesting, if you looked at each, say you looked at A and the only thing you looked at was, no capacity, you might, if you only look at one data point, you might do one thing, and then you've got to add these layers on top. And I know, this is kind of the operational piece of the puzzle. And then when we get into media strategy with Ruchi, it's kind of, well, how does efficiency come into play? Is there even demand to do the thing that the business tells me I need to do? What channels have availability to do that on? And can we do it in a way that, isn't losing money for the business?
That's exactly right. And that's where we start with a framework like this that makes sense for the business. And then even, going into Q2, we've already evolved it in partnership with Cardinal to say, here are the offices that we've seen perform really well within media. Here's the ones that we haven't. And we're digging into that from an operational perspective. And then we're also adding different offices in that may have changed throughout Q1 into that priority list. So it's remaining flexible and remaining really open partners with our media agency.
And Kelly, there's a question in the chat around who owns the practice utilization reporting? Like what are kind of the sources for this data? Who owns it? Do you mentioned the partnerships. So just talk a little bit about how you guys work together to get that data.
Yeah, we have a centralized data team that has all data for all offices in Power BI. And then as I came on board, we made new marketing specific dashboards that brought in and collaborated with that operational data so that when I'm talking over, for example, with our COO, what our needs are in marketing, in that same exact dashboard, we have capacity, we have slots available, we have lag time. So it's all in like one piece. And we can look at it by region, by office. We can slice it many different ways by priority group. So the partnership internally with data is critically important to be able to get to this level of granularity.
And lots of interest on this topic. Miles just chatted in the questions. Do you factor in broken appointments into capacity, or is it just, visit growth?
That's a good question. There is a broken appointment or like no-show rate considered in the capacity model, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it's an important piece to factor in. And I'm sure you have, like you do, not just by region, but you have clinics that behave different ways in terms of show rates.
Absolutely.
So factoring it in. Yeah, absolutely. One more question for you on this topic, and then we can kind of get into the data piece. How frequently are clinics moving from B to C to, how often are they moving around?
Generally speaking, our goal is to make large moves once a quarter and more micro moves within that quarter. So if they're in micro moves would need to be like one office at a time versus many offices at a time. And that might be that we've got a new doctor onboarding. And so there's a huge difference in that capacity model versus when we initially slated that office. So there are certain signal points that would be an automatic, we're going to make this change, versus just typical movement in the business behaviors. We're really looking at that from a macro level on a quarterly basis.
Awesome. I think that helps. Ruchi likes that too, because I think sometimes the behavior is to, you think of micro moves is to do major moves more frequently and try to react. And you end up kind of throwing these algorithms, because that's what we're working with at the end of the day in marketing, into a tailspin where you just never really make progress against a bigger picture objective. So I like that frequency and cadence.
I think that's exactly right. And I think also when you're too reactive, you'll make moves on potentially the wrong input. So for example, most DSOs experienced somewhat of a difficult February due to some headwinds and just random weather throughout the US. This is one of those anomaly events that no one can control. But if you were to base your media strategy on February performance, that wouldn't be a successful indicator on what you need to change. So we really want to look at all things in totality when we're making macro changes.
Yeah, then you end up with a bad March and a bad April because you based it on February, and it just kind of snowballs out of control.
That's exactly right.
No weather pun intended. All right. Let's look at the data foundation, which is really the next step. So you've got these really strong inputs. The other critical piece to success is measuring as close as you can to affecting, the bottom line, which is getting patients. So how did, I know when you came in, there was some tech in place, but how did that evolve? What did you kind of come in looking at from a KPI perspective? And what are you guys looking at today?
I would say the biggest change, a few different changes. One was really thinking about our investment amount and the cadence of investment based on seasonality. So nothing to do with our business in particular, but more to do with DSOs in general. How are we going to pace out our spending? So for example, instead of spending the same amount in September, October, November, and December, which was typical of this DSO, it's, let's lean into seasonality and let's make sure that we're really capitalizing on end of September, October for our general dentistry, and then starting to wean down as we go into, this year was an election year, so that's a little wonky, but of course, yeah. December. So one was just looking at seasonality. And then two was bringing in, again, those capacity models, as well as slots that are available, and really looking at the templates on specifically in how we can schedule patients from a call center perspective and from an online scheduling perspective. So I would say that the way that we connected the dots for the media strategy had much more to do with some operational alignment than it did with, this team is incredible at what they do. Like, they were already pulling the right levers. We just needed more data from the business to make sure that they were efficient and effective.
And I want to look at kind of some of the MarTech that you might be using to enable the data inputs. Tell me about the tech stack. I know you're actively, in some change there. So walk everybody listening through what you guys are using.
Sure. So we are using, from an ad platform perspective, we are on all Google platforms, Google, YouTube, you name it, Meta, and then we are testing TikTok, which has been really successful thus far. From a call tracking perspective, all paid programs use Patient Prism, and our data with Patient Prism continues to get tighter month over month, so really positive signals there. Our legacy scheduling system was NextHealth. We are transferring to Certify. I will share with this group a very interesting learning was, as we onboard offices from NextHealth onto Certify as our scheduling platform, we are requiring an authentication, which requires patients to put in a code that comes to them before they can actually make an appointment. And we are showing double-digit increases in the conversion rates. I was really afraid we were going to see a fallout, and we're not.
Yeah. Here's the rates you were talking about. It kind of it significantly improves quality. People are more invested in, talk about trying also to improve no-show rates. Just, some people booking that are serious about it.
Absolutely. It's increasing conversion and decreasing no-show rates. And again, I think as a marketer, we always, from a patient perspective, try to make it the easiest process for them as humanly possible. So I quite frankly was really afraid of requiring authentication, and I'm super pleased with the results and that we went for it and tried it. Like that's what trials and pilots are for. And sometimes things happen that surprise you, and it's a happy surprise.
Yeah, I'm going to bounce back and then we'll come back to this slide as we talk through tech.
And then lastly for
CRM.
Go ahead. Yeah,
so for CRM.
Yep. So CRM is fueled by Open Dental, which is our booking platform. We are actually moving towards using Certify also for our CRM, and have thus far been very, very happy with the analytics that we can get back and how closely we can track what our patients are reacting to and how we can best serve them.
And Kelly, a few questions popping up around tech, which a lot of people want to know how other groups are doing it. Daria asked, do you guys offer online scheduling to new and returning patients, or do you have different workflows based on their status?
That's a great question. We have done both. We recently reverted from the Certify rollout, allowing both new and existing patients to just new patients. And the reason there being the mapping, as you can imagine, is so much more complicated with an existing patient because you're going to want to get them on their existing doctor or hygienist schedule. And so there's just some more complications behind the mapping there. We are today moving forward with a phase 1 launch with Certify of new patients only, and we'll then layer on existing patients. Like that is clearly not the future, a present day expectation of patients. Just obviously the slotting of specific doctors can be tricky.
And then one more question on the topic before we move on, that came through the chat. Are you seeing specifically around online no-show rates, kind of benchmarking there? Miles asked if you guys are seeing online no-show rates in the 40% range. I'm not sure if that's a metric you have offhand or are able to share.
We are not seeing online no-show rates at like 40% are no-showing or 60% are no-showing.
The way I'm reading it, and Miles, please feel free to add to the chat, but I'm reading it as, are you seeing online no-show rates of 40%?
We are not. We do see online, we in the past saw online no-show rates higher than call booking no-show rates. However, as we transfer to Certify, we are seeing that flip, and we are seeing the no-show rates be in parity with phone call patients.
So bringing a little bit more, picking up the phone, that requires a little bit more involvement. But yeah, so
Exactly
generally,
right.
I think the general kind of comment back to the group is, if you can find the right and design the right kind of booking flow that balances quantity and quality, you can get those to a similar rate as calls.
Yes.
Awesome. One more topic on measurement, because it's going to lead us nicely into the media kind of strategy portion, is at the end of the day, the reason we use Patient Prism and Certify and some of these tools is so that we can track from a keyword click, GCLID, all the way through a booking. So what, new patient booked appointment kind of being a really critical KPI to moving our digital programs forward. Can you just talk a little bit about finding that metric, identifying that was the right metric for the business, and now how we use it to inform strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of businesses will look at cost per lead, et cetera. And what I was really curious in is, what are the business needs? The business needs are new patients, and how are we figuring out our ROI on our marketing spend for new patients? What data points do we need to get there? And really the data points we need to get there on what is our spend versus what is our revenue? And then what is our net volume of new patients? So it was pretty quick to get to. We need to understand our cost per booking, also to understand how efficient we are with that scalable platform we were talking about earlier. A cost per booking is one of those early indicators of if there might be something wonky going on in the office that's precluding us from being really successful. So cost per booking not only, I think, allows the business to understand how we're doing, but it also allows signals back to our media partner to understand if there's something we need to dig into more on the business side and perhaps pause those campaigns. So I think that like identifying those right data points goes both ways in moving the business forward, as well as helping give those signals back to the media team.
And I think, case in point with with Next Health in place, that we were, struggling to get people all the way through to that booking flow. So I know the Certify rollout is going on as we speak, and will be really interesting to see, how something like that, which is not even remotely close to being a marketing, media initiative, is going to affect marketing efficiency. So it really is, just an indication of how they need to work together.
Absolutely. And it goes back to that first comment of the criticality of the relationship with operations.
Yeah, absolutely. Kelly, anything else you would add, whether it's on this slide, your tech stack, on the data foundation as a whole, before we talk about, well, how do we build on that and from a media strategy perspective?
No, I think it's been just such a wonderful partnership with Cardinal, because you guys are asking the right questions, the same questions, and helping us as a business to get to, let's not just talk about what we want to do on Google or what we want to do on Meta and like the levers we can pull, but let's first talk about what our business problem to solve is, what data we need to have in place to understand if we're even tracking towards that. And then let's make sure that our strategies are driving towards those outcomes. So I think it's just been a really healthy partnership in those regards.
Kelly, you didn't have to give us a shout out, but we do appreciate it. If anyone deserves a shout out, it's Ruchi. And I know we're just about at the halfway mark, which is perfect timing to get us into talking about what does that strategy look like and how have we scaled it. So I am going to turn it over to Ruchi to talk a little bit about some of the strategies. And Kelly, I'm going to ask you some additional questions as we go, but Ruchi, I'll let you drive a little bit here.
Yeah, for sure. Kelly, you touched on a really good point. We need to have the foundation and we need to have the measurement in place to know if we are doing a good job or not, right? And in my experience, the best partnerships that we've had with our clients is when we've had clarity. And that is what we got with NADG. I think right from day one, we've been having some really constructive conversations around what exactly does NADG need out of this partnership, right? Are you guys looking for a general increase in booking volume? Are you guys looking for, like an increase in revenue by tapping into particular kind of services? Is there a particular time frame when you're trying to increase your bookings, right? Like, is a business trying to front load bookings for the first half of the year and then kind of have a softer second half? So this was where we started the partnership. And again, going back to the quadrants that Kelly shared, it was the foundation of all of this. We knew of the 240 practices and the 80 brands that we are supporting digitally. We knew exactly where each of them fell. We knew the ones that are not going to generate bookings, even if we drive a good volume of leads just because of capacity constraints. And we also knew the practices that were struggling for newer patient volume from different fronts. So knowing that and then combining that with what exactly is NADG willing to pay for a particular patient? I think that was the big question here. And because we had the right data tech in place, we knew exactly how much we were paying for one particular patient in November of 2024 and how much we are willing to pay in January of 2025. So knowing where each of the practices and brands fell and combining that with what NADG is willing to pay for each new patient. Now the question was, how exactly can we scale media efficiently? We all need new patients. That is exactly the goal that Kelly is hearing from her operational team, from her practices. But we want to make sure we are also being cost effective and giving NADG the ROI and ROAS that they've been aiming for. So the slide that you see here in front right now is more of an example of the kind of analysis we did in Q4 of 2024. This was perfect timing because Q1, like you all are aware, is a high search demand search demand time period. April, in fact, this year also turned out to be one of the high search demand months. So again, December was perfect in timing. We knew, for example, Cloudland Dental, taking that as an example as one of the partners that NADG has, the question that we had was, okay, Kelly, what quadrant does this brand fall in? And she was able to identify that they actually have a good amount of capacity and they require new patients. Now, from there, Cardinal's journey starts where, okay, how exactly, like, where are we? Am I hitting our goals? Do we need to scale up patient volume? How is our efficiency? So we did a historical look back. We've been running ads for almost over a year with NADG. We looked at how performance has been. What is my impression share loss to budget? How much, what is the volume that I'm driving each month? We did get an internal goal from Kelly that digital needs to hit, like paid media needs to hit approximately 8% of the patient capacity goals that each practice has. So we looked at where exactly is Cloudland Dental in terms of booking volume compared to the 8% goal. We were at approximately 5%. We also looked at the cost per booking we had been driving in Q4, and it was well below the target that NADG was aiming for that particular practice. So the next point is, okay, what is the state of my current campaigns? Am I not able to scale up my volume because I'm limited by budget? Or is it that competition is really high, or my campaigns require more work on the quality score front to actually be efficient in the space? This is also where our applied analytics team kicks in. They basically help us with all kinds of forecasting, and they were the ones who were able to tell us, okay, using Google's Planner and all of these other data tech we have on the back end, you guys can actually scale up with the existing campaigns that you'll have by 23%, and this is a booking volume that you can hit. The next step was understanding if what we have currently, is it enough, or do we need to go into different tactics? And I think that is the biggest challenge, right? We love bottom of funnel search. We want to capture users who are already searching for dentists near me, but there will come a point where you will hit a point of diminishing returns, and you now need to diversify and go into other channels to maintain an effective cost per booking. So this was the point we had with Cloudland Dental, where we realized, okay, I have only 13% impression share loss to budget. I need to scale up a lot more than what my current campaign will allow. And that's when we started the diversification process. We explored Meta as a platform to drive bottom of funnel leads. We expanded into video, display, Gmail, and discovery through our Performance Max campaigns. And needless to say, the work continued on the existing search campaigns to improve our quality scores and see how we can further reduce our impression share loss to budget here. And at the end of the day, we had a very solid Q1 of 2025, a 130% increase in bookings for a 33% lower cost per booking. So not only were we able to increase the booking volume, we were actually able to do it way more efficiently than we had in Q4 of 2025, Q4 of 2024. So this is just a sample of how we went about analyzing the different quadrants and determining what the right fit is. When you're working with a multi-brand, multi-practice DSO, it's very hard to have a strategy for every single practice. And I think that is where Kelly came up with this really beautiful quadrant system, where it's not a cookie cutter approach for, like all the brands, but we are categorizing the brands into some really good quadrants, and then we are creating a strategy for each of the quadrants based on historicals.
Yeah, I was going to say, Kelly, anything you would add there? I think it's really good to look at a brand like Cloudland because it takes you a little bit further in the weeds. But before we talk about PMAX, which was a huge impact on getting that performance, anything you would add?
I think from a business perspective, above and beyond that operations alignment, is really a few things that have helped us is obviously thinking about the future of online scheduling and making sure that we are optimizing that with the partnership with Certify, as well as in partnership with strategy from Cardinal, making sure that we are doing landing page testing and creating new and different landing pages and creative each time we roll out new campaigns.
Yep.
Perfect.
Awesome. Moving on to one of the tactics that played the biggest role in us on the media and the biggest role in helping scale up efficiently in Q1 was Performance Max. Now, this is a product that has been around for a few good years now, but I think all of us in the healthcare space have seen Performance Max struggle with quality, right? And one of the challenges that we took on last year was how can we make this very unique and very easy to use product efficient in terms of quality? Because every time I'm running a PMAX campaign, I see the lead volume spike up, but the cost per booking, but the booking volume is something that is questionable, right? So one of the things that we did was, instead of rolling out Performance Max for every single brand, we identified the ones that were actually hitting diminishing returns on search. We've capped out, we do not have impression share loss to budget, and we still want more bookings. So can we go for a more push marketing approach? Can we find the right audiences? Can we give Performance Max the right audience signals and the right conversion signals to actually get more new patient bookings for us? So we launched this as a test last year for a few select practices that were struggling in search to get a good cost per booking. And we tested a lot. So to Kelly's point, like even with all the other different data, Martek, like you will never know until you test it out. So we started with, okay, based on my search campaign, based on all the demographic information I can see, I know this particular practice is seeing more traction and bookings from a particular age group or a particular gender or household income group. Based on that insights, we designed our Performance Max campaigns to have particular audience groups. We partnered with Kelly's creative team to make sure that the messaging was in line with the user and the audiences that we are targeting. It started as a test. So for every for every practice that we were testing it out, we started with a 15 to 20% of our total budget allocation for the practice. We tested the campaign out for 4 to 6 weeks. I will mention it's extremely important to give Performance Max a little bit time. It's super AI driven. It takes approximately 14 to 21 days for the performance to settle in. And once you give it the right performance signals, you do see some good comparable results to search here. Another thing to call out for Performance Max, anytime you're doing it for any healthcare client, the signals are extremely important. Whenever we have seen Performance Max prove out to be an effective digital strategy, it has been because we are giving it the most optimal possible signal. In this case, it was bookings. Our PMAX campaigns have not been optimizing towards any form of leads or any different stages between a lead to a booking. We were very clear with the PMAX campaign that this is what we are optimizing towards. This is what we need the campaign to be driving. And that has been one of the bigger success drivers for the strategy as well. Another thing to call out is Performance Max is a volume play. You will see a lot of impressions, a lot of clicks. The CTR is going to be a little low and the conversion rates are going to be lower just because of the inventory as compared to search, as compared to the search counterpart. However, we knew from Kelly and her team that the cost per booking is the most important metric. So as long as the cost per booking is panning out in line with search and other platforms that we are running, we knew that Performance Max is something that we could use to drive bookings up. So based on this, we were able to drive some really good results for Performance Max in Q1 of 2025. A total of 38% of our bookings were driven by Performance Max, and we had an 8% improvement in our cost per booking overall for the account. At the same time, for the brands that had both a search and a PMAX presence, 50% of the bookings were coming directly from PMAX, and they saw a combined 28% drop just because we diversified our channels and went from just search to search, video, Gmail, Discovery, and all of these other platforms.
Ruchi, quick call out. I know there's varying schools of thought on PMAX and using it as an expansion tactic. Just this week, I think, or last week, Google announced they'll be rolling out some additional reporting on PMAX, which will be really cool to enhance what we can see today. It's a lot of blind trust. And to Ruchi's point, blind trust with the the main requirement that if it doesn't drive bookings, we're not spending on it, right? So that data feed being really important. I want to pause really quickly. We got a question in the chat, and I think Ruchi, even I think your next slide is kind of about the evolution. Kelly, one of the members of the chat asked about how you're facilitating landing pages, how you're building them, how you're testing them, what if you're using tech or just kind of using the core CMS. Any thoughts there?
Yes, and I did just respond in line on this as well. We are utilizing our main CMS. Our internal team is creating those landing pages, and then we are testing them with performance against metrics aligned on with Cardinal.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's such a critical piece of evolving your digital strategy. There's all the in-platform work, the channel expansions, but also getting people, through the funnel, reducing frictions, reducing barriers too. So we like that those two things are happening together. Ruchi, I will let you kind of round out the core channel before we talk about full funnel and expansion.
Yep, 100%. I think this slide is very, very relevant for a lot of DSOs here. Again, we talked about complete clarity from NADG, right? Like we knew that paid media is supposed to be driving 8% of the capacity goals. Now 80 brands and 240 practices spread across the states have very varied behavior. There were some that were easily hitting their goals even without us rolling out 3 different strategies. And then there are some that are not seeing enough search demand, that are seeing higher competition in the area and might require more tactics. So one of the things that we are trying to evolve into 2025 is understanding what brand and practice requires what level of support. Not every brand needs to be on Bing. Not every brand needs to be on programmatic, or not every brand has to have like 7 different strategies running. We categorize them, we bucket them based on the conditions, on the needs, on the capacity, and then we decide how to go about it. So this is just a visual of us trying to evolve into, if a particular brand is only hitting 6 to 8% of the goals, what are the 4 strategies I'm going to be deploying in 2025 to make sure we can scale up efficiently? And if a brand is already hitting 8%, we continue the work, right? We do user landing page experience testing. We continue to monitor our campaigns. We do all kinds of ad copy testing. We continue the work to bring the cost per booking down, but we do not need to diversify into a full funnel strategy or have a presence in multiple channels just because the need is not there. So this is what our vision is for 2025. Moving into another discussion that fits really well with the last slide about the full funnel strategy, right? I think as a marketer, and anybody in the marketing space, it's very easy to immediately think that a good digital strategy has a presence everywhere. I need to be on programmatic, I need to be on Meta, I need to be in Performance Max, Demand Gen, local service ads, any other product that Google is offering. However, again, it is very need-based. And I think Google's ecosystem has also evolved really well now to provide products at different stages of the funnel. They have search ads and they have local service ads, which is a relatively new offering. I think it's been around for almost 2 years now, but it's an evolving product. We have Performance Max, which, Lauren, to your point, has been constantly evolving. We always see new features being rolled out, better insights from Performance Max. And Demand Gen is one of the later products that they rolled out by, moving away from the traditional discovery campaigns. And we as marketeers are still trying to figure out if Demand Gen can be used more as an upper funnel tactic, or do we have room to actually go down, just use it as a lead gen tactic. So again, we don't need to be everywhere. We just need to understand what brands require, what level of support, and make sure that we have our presence is in the right layer of the funnel. And again, this is just a visual of some of the tactics that we as an agency have tried across the board. Again, it's extreme. Performance Max, Meta, and Demand Gen are three channels or products, I would say, that are still finding their space. They are traditionally considered to be in the upper or the mid to upper funnel. But even with Meta rolling out all of these different lead gen tactics, we have been seeing success as in driving direct patient leads and bookings, even through Meta. Same thing from Performance Max. It's a very full funnel tactic, but it has been very efficient and sometimes comparable to bottom of funnel Google search in driving more bookings and new patient volume. So again, there are a lot of tactics out there. It depends on how you are molding the tactic and how you're using it to achieve the business goal that you want your client to hit.
And Ruchi, just to pause there and ask Kelly exactly what you just mentioned, I think it's very easy as marketers and as CFOs who are looking at the data to say, I want to look at that last click attribution. I want every dollar to be, working to drive exactly, something attributable. How, like, as a business, I know you guys are doing a lot of testing. You mentioned TikTok and some other things. How are you thinking about the investments for those, how you measure them, how you think bigger picture and continue to justify those spends, even if they're not one-to-one with search?
I think that question is really more of a company culture and structure question, even above and beyond a marketing question, because it really, what it's saying to me is, how much do you judge me to, or how much do you trust me rather to lead the marketing function? And are we giving the right signals back to the business that we're taking calculated but necessary risks to move our performance forward, and how are we moving our performance forward? So I think that you have to have some quick wins to show sort of what you're doing, but you also have to have the trust and the kind of rope within your organization and your leadership team to say they trust you to make these decisions on investment. Here's the budget we have. Here's what we have to achieve. It's really this department's responsibility to ensure we do that.
Get all the quick wins, earn the trust, then you get the freedom, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. Another important thing that I wanted to talk about today is about our strategies for different services, right? Again, in the dental space, we obviously have general dentistry, which has the highest search demand. Everybody's searching for dental care near me or dentist near me. But then there are also specialized high revenue services that particular dental practices specialize in, right? You would have a particular clinic that does dental implants and dentures. That is their bread and butter, apart from general dentistry. And then you will have other practices that are heavily focused on orthodontics. So braces, clear aligners, stuff like that. The one important thing to remember is we think of the dental space as one. We would look at seasonality and we would think that all of these would have the same trends, but that is not the case. Orthodontics, for example, is one that particularly stands out in the second half of Q2 and the first half of Q3, where back to school season is where we see a lot of demand for orthodontics. Same way, general dentistry, to Kelly's point, like October, November are kind of good. December tapers down, and then Q1 and April are really big for general dentistry. So again, just remembering that you're talking to very different people when you are running an ad for general dentistry versus orthodontics or implants and dentures is really important to driving success here. The other thing to remember is how much nurturing does a user require in each of these services, right? A decision for general dentistry is easier and it is cheaper for me as a user than to make a decision for dental implants and dentures. You probably want to touch the user multiple times, for a dental implant or denture service, just because it is high revenue, it is high cost, and there is some amount of thought process and commitment that you're making if you are opting for a service like this. So again, remembering the audience that we are talking about and identifying the number of user touch points we require for each of these services is very essential. The last thing I would want to call out here is the audience targeting, right? We have a bunch of data providers out there who can provide claim-based insurance, like claim-based data. They can provide us contextual data and also a few, basically like different kind of audience data about, this user is interested in dental implants and dentures. Now, again, if you are talking about a specialized or niche service, you absolutely want to make sure that you're targeting the right audience. Like, I don't want somebody who is 18 years old to be looking at a denture or dental implant ad, but maybe somebody who is 45 to 50 years old would be interested and have a very high chance of converting if I know they're already in market. So again, there are a bunch of data providers out there. You will hit a cap in terms of search demand for some of the specialized services in Google Ads. And that would be a very good time to explore some of the other data providers out there and how they can be leveraged in your digital strategy.
Ruchi, I clicked past you a little bit because this was relevant to that third-party audience. I think you touched a little bit on messaging and how many touch points someone needs if they're starting kind of at the top of the funnel versus being pulled down. I think this slide in particular will be a good takeaway for anyone. I do want to ask Kelly, as you think about moving up the funnel, testing TikTok, testing social, I think one of the barriers a lot of groups of your scale with multiple brands face is creative production. How do you think about enabling that type of testing when you've got to create so many assets to support it?
Great question. We seek to have different groups of creative. So if we have, call it 4 different types of offices, we might have 4 different shoots a quarter. Within that, we then utilize AI tools to build out the assets so that we're not relying on an entire creative team, which we don't have a huge creative team. So really thinking smartly about what content we need to shoot, how we scale just the sheer number of assets needed for all of these channels. And then also, quite frankly, what we ask for from the offices from an organic perspective.
Yeah. That kind of user-generated content, something that feels really native and authentic. That's usually the barrier to getting onto TikTok, for example, is having content that feels like it belongs on that channel versus a branded commercial.
Yes. And oftentimes when we do shoots, we lean more towards UGC, and we might have almost always try to have someone also shooting on an iPhone, even if we're using a more high quality production.
Yep. I love that. That's perfect. And I think it's a great segue into just kind of rounding out the move to social, which I think just is a big leap for a lot of groups who you can do a lot in the Google ecosystem, as we've just discussed, but it's kind of a big step to move over into a wholly new platform. Ruchi, a couple tips for the group listening on what are some of the signals, business or otherwise, that you might look at?
100%. So I think the first thing that we need to determine before we put our foot into social is what exactly I'm trying to get out of this platform, right? We have a new practice opening up in Lilburn. Do we want to use Meta as an awareness platform to ensure that users in the area are aware of an upcoming dental clinic that is going to have a tons of availability? Do we want to use it for existing clinics and just drive more patient bookings through the different lead options that Meta is providing? Or is this more of a HIPAA compliant remarketing tactic where I can, hit the user at multiple points in their journey? So again, determining where social fits into your digital landscape is super important. And again, just like it applies for Google Ads and our search strategy, you want to make sure that your creatives are 100% aligning with the audiences that you are targeting. An ortho group is going to respond very differently to a meta ad as compared to a general dentistry user group. So just making sure we are identifying the right services and the right brands that we want to advertise here. And then the last piece is, when do we move in there, right? Media mix modeling is extremely important for any advertiser out there. How much investment is too much investment versus how much is too little? I think that's the question that every advertiser is dealing with. So making sure we understand investing a certain percentage of dollars, what does that mean on my overall ROI? So again, just keeping a few things in mind before we move into social, but a very, very powerful tool to reach out to your users and even generate bottom of funnel leads in our experience.
Kelly, anything you would add? I know you've done quite a bit of social testing. I want to make sure we really hit on how you think about its role in your overall strategy.
Absolutely. I mean, I echo everything Ruchi touched on. I think that I really think of social as a mid-funnel tactic. I also think of, when it goes back to that finance question, it's usually a pretty straight correlation between starting a really strong social campaign and seeing what your cost per bookings on Google look like. So you can immediately see the positive impact on that acquisition piece at the bottom of the funnel when you really start investing in mid and top funnel tactics.
And Kelly, just one final question on that. Do you look at organic blended in there as well, knowing that's a channel that's going to pick up a good bit of what you might generate from a demand perspective?
Absolutely. I think that particularly for DSOs like ours who have many brands, the organic piece is a lot trickier than the paid piece. So really right now we're focusing on nailing the paid piece as we really think about how to scale the organic piece, because forcing an office manager into being a social media manager is not going to work unless that office manager just happens to also be super passionate about social, which happens in some cases, but not in all. So I think that really nailing the organic piece is again, it really takes stepping back and thinking about it really strategically, and from how do I scale this? What do I need to give my teams in terms of even embedding people within offices, within regions, etc., to have that organic piece that absolutely is really critical, not only in helping to drive paid, but into learning what's going to be successful in paid.
Yeah, and you touched a little bit on, I mean, that's clearly a part of your outlook, but I want to give you kind of the floor. I think we did a lot of Q&A throughout this, so we were able to get to a lot of the questions. I want to give you an opportunity to kind of round us out here. What's on the horizon? What do you see as the future of, for your organization, but also just where the industry is going?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of kind of tactical acquisition pieces. We will continue to test into social. We will continue to test into more full funnel tactics for paid acquisition. But I would say by and large, from a DSO perspective, most DSOs, their biggest business challenge today is doctor attrition. And so I think from a marketing perspective, there needs to be a huge emphasis on actual brand work. Who are you as a brand? What are your mission, vision, values? How are you bringing that to light? Any DSO can offer similar, comparable, ownership models, comp models, etc. But how do you build a brand that is a true living, breathing brand and not just words on paper, that makes docs want to stay, that attracts the patients through this paid media that then stay with us and offer word to mouth? So it's all this huge cycle, but it really does start with understanding who you are as a company and building that strong brand really authentically. And so I see us doing a lot of, I think we've laid really, really strong groundwork in this digital acquisition space. We'll, again, continue to push on full funnel and social, but really focus on who we are as a brand and how we stay true to that and attract and keep doctors.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Kelly and Ruchi. I know we've got 1 minute to spare, so we'll give everybody just a breather before their next meeting if you're jumping off. This will be, I think someone asked, is this recorded? So yes, this was recorded and will be accessible after the fact. And that just about rounds us out for the event.
Thank you to all of our speakers for an excellent presentation, as well as Cardinal Digital Marketing for sponsoring today's webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
See y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.